Months after believing the nightmare was over, Luna and her family discovered that the darkness still lurked, silent, waiting for the right time to return. Small signs began to reappear, the sudden cold, strange symbols, and that suffocating feeling that something invisible was watching. Only this time, they weren't alone. An unexpected reunion brought Pastor Elias, an old family friend, into the story, who knew exactly what they were facing. What followed was a battle unlike any before. There was no screaming, no running, no flying objects. There was music, prayers, hugs, and a love so intense it seemed to cut through the air. And it was in this union, with light surrounding every corner of the house, that Luna prepared to look the other in the eyes for the last time and say the words that would change everything forever. Almost 6 months had passed since the night. The circle was broken in the backyard. Luna's days seemed to be lighter, with her school routine, games, and even short weekend outings. Her father, though still vigilant, began to believe the danger had passed. The unusual cold disappeared. The symbols disappeared, and the nights became silent again. However, some mornings the girl would wake up with subtle dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't gotten enough rest. When her mother asked if everything was okay, Luna would simply reply, "I had bad dreams, but I don't want to talk about them." Her parents tried to ignore it, but deep down, they knew that her serenity might be hiding something. Life seemed to go on with love, affection, and reconciliation, but their daughter's prolonged silences were like small cracks in a glass that, sooner or later, could shatter. The first concrete sign came one rainy afternoon. Luna was drawing in the living room when her father, passing behind her, noticed an incomplete symbol in the corner of the page. It wasn't identical to the previous one, but it resembled the same circular structure. When he asked what it was, Luna stopped coloring and said, "It's nothing, it just popped into my head." Days later, the neighbor's dog began barking insistently every time she walked past the gate. And one morning, the bathroom mirror was fogged with a mark made by small fingers, even though no one had showered. These episodes reignited the insecurity the family had tried to bury. The hope they had built with so much effort began to be eroded by the suspicion that the other was still searching for a way. The parents' courage was being tested again, but now they felt that perhaps something different was needed, something they hadn't yet tried. The confirmation came subtly but devastatingly. One seemingly normal night, her mother went to tuck Luna in and realized the room was freezing cold, despite the heater being on. As she leaned over to adjust the blanket, she heard a whisper so low it almost went unnoticed. "I'm waiting." Her instinct was to deny what she'd heard, but the tone of that voice left no doubt. The presence hadn't been destroyed, just weakened. The mother left the room, her heart racing, and told her husband. This time, he didn't try to rationalize. They both knew they couldn't face this alone again. They needed help, but not just any help. They needed something or someone capable of breaking not only the spiritual connection, but also the root of their fear. And it was at that point that, unbeknownst to them, fate began to set the pieces in motion for a reunion that would change everything. It was a Saturday morning when the family decided to go to the city's central market, something they hadn't done in months. The place was bustling, with the aroma of freshly baked bread and fresh coffee mingling with the hum of conversation. While his mother selected fruit, his father stepped aside to pick up some items, and as he turned a corner, heard a familiar voice calling his name. He turned and, to his surprise, saw Pastor Elias, a childhood friend he hadn't seen in over 10 years. Elias had moved to another state to lead a congregation, and from what his father remembered, had always been a man of deep faith, courage, and understanding. The reunion was warm, full of affection and gratitude, as if no time had passed. But as soon as they greeted each other, Elias frowned, looking him in the eye, and said, "You seem burdened. Something's bothering you, isn't it?" His father hesitated for a few seconds, but decided not to hide it. He briefly explained that the family had experienced strange events in recent years, mentioning nightmares, voices, and sudden drops in temperature. Elias remained silent, listening intently, but his expression grew increasingly serious. When his father finished, the pastor responded with firm calm. "I believe you. What you're describing isn't just a coincidence, and it's not something you have to face alone." These words, spoken with such certainty and without judgment, filled his father with a mixture of relief and emotion. For the first time, an outsider wasn't trying to minimize the situation. Elias then explained that he would be in town for a few weeks to visit his elderly mother, and offered to meet Luna and hear her story in detail. On the way home, his father told his mother about the reunion, and she immediately remembered Elias, not only as a longtime friend of her husband, but as someone who had held Luna in his arms when she was just a few months old. There was something comforting in the idea that a trusted person, filled with wisdom and faith, could enter this battle alongside them. That night, as she tucked Luna in, her mother told her that an old family friend would be visiting. The girl smiled strangely peacefully and replied, "I know he'll bring light." That sentence, spoken with sincerity and without a trace of irony, left her mother speechless. Perhaps finally, the path to peace was beginning to reveal itself. 2 days after their reunion, Elias arrived at the family home. The weather was cold, but his warm smile seemed to warm the atmosphere. Luna greeted him shyly, but not strangely, as if she recognized him from some distant memory. The pastor sat on the sofa, his posture relaxed, and began to talk to the girl about simple things: school, drawings, her favorite toys. Gradually, his light tone gave way to deeper questions. "Do you feel like someone is watching you?" he asked. Gently, Luna looked at the floor and nodded. "He doesn't like it when you talk about him, but you're different." "He's quiet now." Elias realized this wasn't a childish imagination. There was something real, something that made her measure her words, as if she feared reprisal. Her father watched silently, feeling that each sentence brought a piece of truth to the surface. Elias then asked Luna to describe what he looked like. The girl didn't hesitate. She spoke about his exaggerated height, his long arms, his shapeless face, and the feeling of cold that had come before he appeared. She also mentioned the circular symbol, now more complete than before, and said that she sometimes saw it engraved on the skin of the world, as if imprinted in the air. Elias remained calm, but his eyes revealed the gravity of it. He turned to his parents and said, "This is a manifestation of spiritual oppression, and it will not stop until it is confronted directly. But not with physical force, but with love, forgiveness, and faith." His tone was not alarmist, but assured, as someone who had seen something similar before. The previously tense atmosphere seemed to gain a spark of hope. Before leaving, Elias asked for prayers for the house. He gathered everyone in the living room, took each one's hands, and in a firm and compassionate voice, began to speak words of blessing, peace, and protection. Halfway through the prayer, Luna closed her eyes and sighed, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. But in the end, she said something that made everyone look at each other. He didn't like it, but he wasn't angry either. He just left for now. Elias wasn't alarmed. He just smiled tenderly and said, "That means he already knows he's not just dealing with you." As he said goodbye, he assured them he would return the next day and bring something important to begin: a process of definitive liberation. For the first time in a long time, hope seemed stronger than fear. The following Sunday, Elias invited the family to attend the service at the local church where he was preaching during his stay. The building was simple, with polished wooden pews and stained glass windows that let in the sunlight in shades of gold and blue. As soon as they arrived, they were greeted by warm hugs and sincere smiles from people they had never met before, but who behaved like old friends. Luna, accustomed to the constant tension of enclosed spaces, seemed strangely at ease there. There was no biting cold, no shadows in the corners, just an environment overflowing with affection, generosity, and respect. Her mother, who had been carrying the weight of insecurity for months, felt a quiet shock when she realized she was surrounded by people who wanted to help without asking for anything in return. Her father, though more reserved, began to notice that the sense of threat seemed to have remained outside. The service began with soft music, and the voices blended harmoniously, creating an atmosphere of hope and reconciliation. Elias took the pulpit and, before beginning to preach, spoke about the importance of empathy, collaboration, and emotional intelligence in dealing with moments of darkness. Without naming names, he described situations that mirrored what the family had experienced: freezing nights, invisible voices, fears trying to take over the mind. Darkness feeds on fear and loneliness, but true love drives out all fear, he sighed, discreetly glancing at where Luna was sitting. She, in turn, seemed to absorb every word, as if they were answers to questions she had never asked aloud. At the end, Elias called the family to the front. He told the congregation that there was a home in need of peace and asked them to pray together. People approached, placing their hands respectfully on the shoulders of the parents and Luna. There was no pressure, just a collective presence of understanding and courage that filled the room. Luna closed her eyes and smiled slightly, as if feeling something comforting. Her mother wept softly, overcome with gratitude and inspiration. The father, with his hand on his daughter's shoulder, noticed that, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alert, she was serene. When they left, the sun seemed warmer, and even the air they breathed felt different. Elias simply said, "What started here will continue, and you won't be alone." In the days following the church visit, Luna seemed different. She still woke up early, but now she spent part of her mornings reading the small children's books Elias had left, all with stories about hope, resilience, and perseverance. With each page, she asked curious questions. Why didn't the hero get angry? Or, how did he know he wasn't alone? Her father could tell these conversations were shaping something new in her, a kind of quiet courage, not based on defiance or physical confrontation, but on confidence. Her mother, in turn, began to notice that the sudden cold spells had diminished. When they occurred, Luna no longer showed fear. Instead, she would close her eyes for a few seconds, as if taking a deep breath, and whisper, "You're not in charge here." Elias continued to be present, visiting the house and reinforcing the idea that there was no greater power than love and understanding to break cycles of oppression. He spoke to Luna, but he also prepared his parents, teaching them to remain calm, to work collaboratively, and not to react angrily to provocations. Darkness cannot bear the light. But light is not only strength, it is also patience. It is also forgiveness, he would say. In one of these meetings, Luna said she still felt the other watching, but that now he seemed hesitant. He doesn't come as close as before. "I think he knows I'm not alone," she commented, with a mixture of honesty and insight that impressed her parents. As the weeks passed, small victories began to appear. The circular symbol, previously seen on glass and walls, disappeared completely. Bad dreams became more rare, and when they did occur, Luna said she could wake up before reaching the chained door. Pastor Elias could see that she was learning to close the gaps that had previously given space for the presence to act. One afternoon, during a conversation in the backyard, he told the family, "The most important thing is not to expel something, but to prevent it from finding its way back." These words stuck in everyone's mind, especially Luna's, who replied, "Then when he comes, I'll show him the door isn't here anymore." It was clear the girl, with only her sincerity and newfound strength, was preparing for a decisive moment. The night was quiet, with a gentle wind blowing through the trees when the attack began. It was just after 2 in the morning when her father awoke to a loud crash from the hallway. Opening the door, he saw all the paintings on the wall lying on the floor as if they had been ripped down at once. The temperature plummeted, making her breath come out in visible steam. Her mother rushed to Luna's room but found her sitting awake on the bed, staring at the opposite wall. In the mirror's reflection, a tall, distorted shadow moved slowly, its long arms almost touching the floor. "He's angry, very angry," Luna said, her tone calm but tense. The cold in that room was unlike any before, dense and almost suffocating, as if the very atmosphere had been taken over. Elias had warned that resistance would increase before the final victory, but nothing prepared the family for what happened next. The doors of the house began to slam shut on their own, and a deep sound, almost like a muffled roar, echoed through the hallway. The circular symbol, missing for weeks, reformed on the window pane, but this time it was complete and glowed with a dark light, as if made of condensed shadow. Elias, who had been in the house that night, placed himself between Luna and the window, raising his voice in a firm tone, full of faith and authority. "You have no place here. This house is protected by love and by the light you cannot extinguish." The shadow retreated slightly, but responded with an icy breath that made the lights flicker. It was then that Luna stepped forward, defying her parents' protective instincts. She looked directly at the symbol and said, "I am not your bridge. You do not command me." The presence seemed to hesitate, the air wavering like a mirage, but then it advanced with greater force, making the ground tremble. Elias asked everyone to gather and pray aloud. The sound of united voices, filled with sincerity, courage, and understanding, began to fill the room. The shadow stirred, increasingly unstable, as if being pushed out. But before disappearing, it issued a final warning, echoing off the walls, "I'll be back if you let me." The cold began to recede, but everyone knew it had only been a desperate attempt to prevent what was about to happen. 2 days after the attack, Elias decided there was no more time to waste. He called some members of his church and explained bluntly that they needed to be together in that house. On the appointed night, cars began arriving, and one by one, men, women, and young people entered with expressions of compassion and determination. Some carried instruments, others just their voices and open hands, ready to offer affection and comfort. Luna watched curiously from the stairs, and her mother noticed that the girl showed no fear. She even seemed eager to see what would happen. When everyone gathered in the living room, Elias explained that they would hold a prayer vigil, remaining together until dawn. "This house will be filled with light and goodness until there is no room for anything else," he said, looking into every corner as if speaking directly to the darkness. The prayers began quietly, almost like a collective whisper. Gradually, the voices grew louder, and the atmosphere in the house changed. The air grew warmer, the soft scent of flowers seemed to appear out of nowhere, and the tension that had previously weighed down every wall dissolved. Luna, sitting on her mother's lap, closed her eyes and smiled, as if feeling an invisible embrace around her. Elias asked everyone to stand and walk through the rooms, declaring words of peace and reconciliation. The group moved serenely, but also firmly, as if knowing they were reclaiming lost territory. Each sentence uttered seemed to push the shadow further away, and even the normally more reserved father felt a new courage well up within him. Around 3 in the morning, the most intense moment arrived. A strong wind blew against the windows, and the light wavered for a few seconds, but no one flinched. Elias raised his voice and said, "There is no room for fear where there is perfect love. There is no room for lies where there is truth." The words echoed so strongly they seemed to pass through the walls. Luna opened her eyes and said calmly, "He's out there and he can't get in." A reverent silence filled the room, followed by soft chanting that continued until the first rays of sunlight. When the vigil ended, The house was different. The cold had completely disappeared, and the peace was so palpable that even the sounds of the street seemed softer. But Elijah knew the final moment was yet to come. The presence's final attempt came the night after the vigil. The family was gathered in the living room, talking, when the temperature suddenly dropped, as if all the heat had been sucked out. The lamps flickered, and in the reflection of the window, a tall, distorted shadow began to form outside. Elias, who had decided to spend another night with them, stood between the figure and the family. "You have no authority here," he declared, his voice louder than his own. Outside, the shadow moved back and forth, pressing against the glass as if searching for a weak spot. Luna took her mother's hand and said, "He wants me to leave, but I won't." For the first time, the girl's gaze showed not fear, but trust. Elias asked everyone to join in prayer again. This time with greater force and direction, the words came out like arrows full of love, faith, and forgiveness, and the shadow reacted by retreating, crumbling, and reforming, as if struggling to maintain its shape. The father, filled with a courage he hadn't known he possessed, began to declare aloud, "This house belongs to the light, and nothing can steal the peace we have received." The air, previously heavy and cold, began to change. A warm breeze blew in through the window, contrasting with the dark presence that still lingered. Luna, unprompted, began repeating her father's words with a firmness impressive for her age. Each sentence seemed to weaken the figure outside, as if the barrier on the house became more solid. It was then that the shadow, already reduced to a shaky outline, let out a sharp sound, almost a scream, that echoed down the street. But this time, instead of fear, what filled the room was a wave of peace, as if the darkness itself had been driven out by the collective force of that moment. Elias approached the window and in a calmer tone said, "Go. You're not coming back." Here, the figure vanished into thin air, evaporating like smoke in the sun. The house remained silent for a few seconds, and then Luna, still holding her mother's hand, smiled and said, "It's over, truly." Elias nodded, but knew there was one final step left, one that would seal this victory forever and prevent any shadow from finding its way back. That moment would come with ultimate liberation. The morning after the confrontation, Elias gathered the family in the living room. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, but he knew there was still something to be done, not for the house, but for Luna. "Darkness cannot survive where there is reconciliation and forgiveness," he said, looking into the girl's eyes. "You need to say, in your own words, that he no longer has power over you." Luna was silent for a few seconds, as if gathering strength, and then closed her eyes. "I'm not angry with you. I'm not afraid of you. I forgive you and let you go." The atmosphere changed instantly. There was no wind, no noise, just a feeling of lightness that filled the room. The mother felt tears flow without realizing it, overcome by an emotion that mixed gratitude and relief. Elias then asked everyone to stand and walk through the house, not to expel anything, but to fill each room with words of life. The father spoke of courage and hope. The mother professed love and care. And Luna, in a firm voice, repeated, "This is a place of light." As they walked forward, it was as if the air became cleaner, warmer, more alive. At one point, Luna stopped in the hallway, looked at the wall where the symbol used to appear, and said, "You are no longer welcome." Elias, with a slight smile, placed his hand on her shoulder and affirmed, "Now, yes, it is complete." It was the final seal, not just of a spiritual act, but of an emotional maturation that the girl had achieved with resilience and faith. When they finished, they all sat together in the living room. There was no cold, no shadows, none of the oppressive feeling of before. The silence this time was not threatening, but welcoming. Elijah prayed one last time, giving thanks for the delivery and asking for peace to remain in that home. Luna rested her head in her mother's lap and fell asleep, peaceful as she hadn't felt in a long time. The father, looking at Elijah, said, "I thought we needed to fight, but I realized we needed to love." The pastor nodded, and in a calm voice replied, "Love is the greatest weapon against any darkness." In that moment, everyone knew the battle was won not by force, but by the decision to choose the light. The following days were unlike any other period the family had experienced. There was no longer that invisible weight in the hallways, nor the biting cold that usually announced its presence. The mornings began to smell of fresh coffee and warmed bread, and the sound of Luna's laughter echoed through the house without interruption. Her father, who had previously found himself constantly glancing over his shoulder, now felt free to plan for the future without fear. Her mother, upon waking, no longer needed to prepare emotionally for what she might find. It was as if a thick cloud had finally dissipated, revealing a clear, welcoming sky. Even the neighbors commented that the atmosphere around the house seemed brighter and lighter, as if something had profoundly changed. Elias, before returning to his hometown, paid one last visit. He brought a small gift for Luna, a children's Bible with colorful illustrations and a handwritten dedication. "So that you may always remember that you are not alone and that light always finds those who seek it," the message read. Luna, with her sincere manner, replied, "I know. Because now the light is here and it won't go away." There was a moment of emotion-filled silence, where everyone felt that this wasn't just a pretty phrase. It was the genuine expression of a peace achieved with faith, courage, and the decision to keep love as the foundation. Elias said goodbye with a strong hug, and the family knew that, even from afar, he would always be part of this victory. Months later, Luna's birthday was celebrated in the backyard, with friends, music, and abundant food. As the children played, her mother watched her daughter running in the sunset light and felt a wave of gratitude. There was no longer fear, only the inspiration of knowing they had overcome something that seemed impossible. Her father, at her side, held her hand and said, "If the darkness ever tries to return, let's remember what we've learned. Together, we are untouchable." And that afternoon, as the candles were blown out and applause filled the air, it became clear to everyone that Luna's story was no longer about fear or survival, but about overcoming and choosing to live in the light. The cycle was over. Ultimate peace had arrived. Do you believe that love can overcome any darkness? Many say so, until darkness knocks on the door. What if it were your home, your family, your peace at stake? Would you have the courage to face fear with faith, or would you let it take over little by little? Luna and her family learned, in the most intense way possible, that light doesn't arrive by chance. It is a daily choice, sustained by courage, unity, and the decision not to give in. Perhaps you too have felt the chill of loneliness, or the pressure of something you can't explain. If this has happened, ask yourself, isn't it time to definitively close the door on everything that keeps you from peace? If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications now. Because here, with each new video, you'll learn not only to recognize darkness, but also to overcome it.